Hello and welcome back to What's Your Decision Custom Position. This is the fifth video in the series on my opening on this custom position that I have created. If you haven't watched the others, I recommend that you do so first, or at least watch the first video, which is the introduction video, before watching this one. But basically, the first video was an introduction, and then we covered theory on 1e4. Then we had 3 videos on theory with 1f4, and then f5. So that's what we've done so far. We've had 3 videos on that, 1 video on e4 and 1 introduction video. And in this video, we're going to be focusing on the move 1e3. So pawn to e3. So this move, if you haven't seen other theory in this position, you might be a bit confused as to why this might be a potential opportunity for white. And this is actually a very aggressive opening. So if you remember white's f4, so for example, after f4, c5, f5, white's idea was to play f4, rook f3, and to take on c3. So that was the idea behind this opening. Well, with e3, there's a very similar idea, which is e3 after, let's see, the main line, which is c5, bishop e2, rook d1, rook d3, and then taking on c3. So that's the idea with this opening, and it's a very aggressive opening for white. Now, you might ask, okay, sure, that sounds good, but why not just play e4 and then do the same developments? Well, the thing is that after e4, let's see, e4, d5, bishop e2, and then you'll see that black is able to get a pawn on d4 and protect the c3 pawn. So basically with this opening, that's why e3 is played. So in this video, we're going to be covering, we're going to actually do 3 or 4 videos on this position. So e3, c5, and this video is going to be about theory with that opening. And we're going to continue this theory in the next video, but also there's another line that black can play, is e3, b5. And that plan is looking to get the knight to b6, and after moving this pawn, bring the knight back to d7 and take over here, or bring the knight, if possible, to d5 and take over here on f6. But we're not going to be covering that in this video. We're going to be covering the main line. So let's get into it. So e3, c5, bishop e2, and d5. So this is the most intuitive defense for black, and black is basically trying to reinforce the pawn on d4 so that white cannot take on c3. So rook d1, white continues, and c6 is played as the main line of this opening. One very interesting thing to note here is that after c6 in any position, right, black is threatening to play bishop e5 and then to take on f6. So whenever you see c6 in most positions, we have to play the move f4 so that we can block the bishop from going on to e5. There are also lots of ideas with, for example, I guess not exactly here, but at any point if the knight goes to e6, the knight could take on g5, so then we would also play f4. Though in this position the d5 pawn is hanging, but those are the ideas over here. So the main line goes with c6. c6, so f4 is played over here to block bishop e5, knight e6, and this one's interesting, so knight f3. So you might think over here that that white can, so you might want to play rook d3 over here, but if you do that, black has d4, and they're protecting it. So so in this position, you want to play knight f3 first. So this is an interesting idea because you might think, why not just knight f3 kind of blocks the bishop on g1 and this knight over here. So you might think, okay, well, I get that the knight is adding another like protector of the d4 to stop black from being able to push d4, but what if we just played f3 instead, and now the bishop indirectly like protects against d4, right? And this is probably a better move because we can get our knight into the game. However, with f3, I have in my notes here, the engine thinks it's slightly better than knight f3, but white concedes that they cannot sacrifice the rook to free their queen and bishop, and they come away with less space in the end. So, so after f3, we could have rook d8 over here, and if we try to play rook d3, we have d4. If takes, takes, and if we play with the bishop over here trying to win the c3 pawn, we have knight takes d4, and then if we take over here, we have, and the king is getting hunted down by the bishop, and will be lost over here. So we can't take that pawn very quickly, and if we can't do that, then after a move like d4, we would have to play something like knight f2, and we have a game over here where black has prevented white from taking on c3. White still has lots of play over here, but black has a bit more space, so white should probably not go down this line. But the theory over here is knight f3. And the idea behind knight f3 is that actually black is going to get the same thing, which means that black is going to be able to prevent white from taking on c3. However, there's an interesting move, and we're going to be going over that move actually in the next video because there's a lot more theory, but I'm just going to show. So rook d8, rook d3, so we've seen moves like this. d4 gets played, and actually over here there's another tactic. So if we take on d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, trying to win c3, but then it is rook takes d4 over here that just wins. Because if we take right now on c3, this amazing move, bishop e5. So bishop e5 gets to be played over here because our f4 pawn is pinned, the king, so they so we can't take the bishop, and this bishop is aiming at f6, so it's going to be able to take over there, but even more importantly, it's indirectly aiming at the rook and the queen over here. So for example, if we were to play rook e3 over here just after rook takes f5, pawn takes, and the bishop's going to take on a1. So white is completely lost over here. So that's why in this position, the main line over here is just rook fd1, which is increasing the pressure on d8 and eventually maybe even taking on c3. However, the next move over here is knight ac7, so the knight is going to be coming into b5 or d5, actually threatening to go over here as well, but the knight will add extra reinforcements. So after knight ac7, white, at this point, basically white's going to concede that they're not going to be able to sacrifice on c3. So instead what white's going to do is white's going to go for the only move that I think white can make over here to make some progress, and that move over here is knight e5. And this is the reason why knight f3 was played earlier instead of pawn to f3, because when the knight goes to e5, there are a lot of ideas and a lot more theory to cover. But actually, I'm going to be covering the rest of this theory on this move knight e5 in the next video, because there's a lot of other stuff to look at first, and knight e5 has a lot of deep theory. So we're going to go over the position from here in the next video. But for now, I'm going to cover a bit more other lines that are in this position. So if we go back a few moves, okay, so first thing to note is that actually instead of d5, black has there's an interesting sideline that black can play, which is c6. So after c6, again, we have to remember that the same idea stands where black's trying to play bishop e5, so we have to play f4, and then black plays knight c7. So in this, basically, this sideline, black has played c6 first because black wants to get the knight into b5 or d5 right away. So this is an interesting move. So for example, if we had rook d1, and let's say we had over here knight d5 would be a good move as well, because knight d5 is aiming at f6. So let's say that d5 was played. Now if rook d1, knight c7, and now we play rook d3 to try and take on c3. Now knight b5 comes, and knight b5 protects the c3 pawn. And so actually in this position, what we would like to do is we'd like to play bishop takes b5, so then after like a pawn recaptures, we can take on c3. However, our rook is blocking our bishop. So what we can do instead is a very interesting idea. So instead of rook d3 in a position like this, this is an amazing move. We can play bishop c4. And the idea behind this move is, well, let's say, now if black moves a knight to b5, we take. But I guess more obviously, white's giving up a bishop, so black can take that. White can take back. And if now b5, so black's trying to take this pawn so they can play knight b5, we play rook d3, and after takes, we take the pawn. And this move, so b5 would be a move over here, which kind of traps. So notice that the rook can't escape from being captured, because any move it goes to, it can be captured. So the best move here is just rook takes a3 check, pawn take, bishop b takes a3, and let's say we get the queen into the game, king b6 for example, and queen takes. So in this position, you might think that, oh well, white is winning because white freed their queen and bishop. However, white had to sacrifice a rook and a bishop to free the pieces. So that's a lot of material to sacrifice. So they sacrificed a rook and a bishop to free a queen and bishop. So essentially, they freed like 4 points of material. However, if you remember from the last video, I showed like the material counting in this variant is a bit different. So, for example, because black's pieces are still trapped, I'm going to highlight in red the pieces that we're not going to count as material here. So it'll be the bishop, this queen. We won't count these 3 pawns. And we also won't count all white's pawns over here that are making sure that the pieces stay trapped. So if I highlight in red, so obviously these pawns will have some play in the game, but while the black's pieces are trapped, I'm not going to count them as material. So if we highlight in red all those pieces that we're not counting in material and then count each side's material, white has 9, 12, 15, 20, 23, 26, 27, 28 points of material, and black here has 5, 10, 13, 16, 19, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28 points of material. So you can see if we count the material this way, material is actually even in this game. And also black still, after they develop their pieces first, you want to do that before focusing on sacrificing. Black could then try to sacrifice on f6. So this is definitely very, very playable for black, this kind of variation. So now going back all the way, that's why after knight c7, bishop c4 would be the move here. That also prevents knight d5, which we saw in the other line was good. But we play bishop c4 before anything else. And then after b5, we go rook d1. So we transpose, and these exact same lines happen, which I've already showed. So that's the idea behind bishop to c4, which looks like a very strange move, but it does have a purpose, and white can play that move if they want. And actually, yeah, so in this, if black wants to play a game where white actually sacrifices, but they able to free their queen and bishop, but they sacrifice more material, white can go for the c6 knight c7 idea as early in the game to try to bring the knight to b5 and force white's hand as to what white wants to do in this position. So let me go look through some other lines. So this is basically the main. See, we looked at this already. Yeah, 95 is the move that we're going to go over our next video, but that is essentially what the main ideas behind this position. I think there's a couple other variations I want to show. Let me just find them. So see this. All right. So black. So we went through the main line, but black has some other interesting things that they can do. So one thing is that we saw the importance of this light squared bishop in this opening. So what we can actually do over here is that black can kind of throw a wrench into white's plans. So there's a very interesting move that actually I think is extremely good for black, and I think in this position they're actually, which is what I recently found out, it might be almost like not a refutation, but a very good a good shot that black has against this opening, and where white should maybe rethink it and go for some other lines. So for example, instead of like going here after c5, like white could go f4 right now, and after d5 they could just like they can kind of just develop normally in a position like this. The computer deems it to be about equal, but as you can see, white is not really going for c3, so to sacrifice on c3 and free their pieces. So it's a bit different, and the idea is with bishop b5. But basically, the idea over here is that after bishop e2, d5, rook d1, instead of playing c6, which is the main line for black has this very interesting move, which looks like first it might lose because the move is bishop to b5. And so first, I guess the obvious thing over here is that, okay, so our bishop is being attacked, and we want to play rook d3, but we can't because well, actually, the reason why we can't is not right now. It's not because the bishop is going to take on d3 right now. It's that these pieces over here are kind of like stopped, and whenever we take on c3, then black's going to win the bishop, and black's going to win the rook as well, and black might even win this rook too. So it's going to be too much material for white to sacrifice. For example, let me just go through the line over here: f4, e6. So white can try to like protect the pieces. We have knight and rook e1. So rook e1's trying to defend this this e2 bishop, and then d4 gets played, e takes, and if white goes for the sacrifice, then bishop takes e2, rook takes e2. Like we're going to probably play rook e because the knight is threatening to go to f5 with checkmate. So computer likes rook e2 as well over here. Just showing some moves. And in this position, black is up material, and I would actually say that black is doing very good because white has sacrificed a lot of material to free their pieces, and black might be able to sacrifice on f6 very easily, as white's defense would be like to play f3, knight f2, and knight g4, but that's like a bunch of moves. So like right now, for example, rook f d8, threatening to go to d6 and to capture over here. White could play, like if white tries to protect it with like queen a1, then there's even like knight c3 ideas over here. So I think black's going to be able to get their queen and bishop free over here with sacrificing less material. So that's why in a position like this, we don't want to. So actually, let me just say, if we play rook takes d4 over here, I'm thinking knight d5. No. Wait, let me look at something. So if rook takes, we have rook f8 or rook. Let's see, rook f8. Yeah, I think that's a tough move because we don't want to. Now, our bishop is pinned, but even so, if we take, then knight takes, and then the c3 pawn is defended, as well as black's looking to go to e6, and we kind of don't have a defense for that. So rook d3 over here, and over here we have knight d5. And so the black is defending against c3 and also attacking f6. You could play rook e3 over here, the computer says, and then knight takes f6. And yeah, we can't even play rook takes c3 because once the knight moves, it's like, for example, if we play and then the knight moves over here, our queen is pinned over here. So yeah, black should just be winning in a position like this, which is why it kind of throws a wrench in our plans. We can't just play rook d3 over here. And so actually, I showed that variation first, but you might just be thinking, why not bishop takes b5? Actually, over here, a takes b5 is a move over here. Is the move that you want to play to just get your pawns just more threatening and stuff. So that's the move that you want to play. But you might be thinking, why not just take and then rook takes d5? That looks like the most logical continuation in this line, and the reason why this idea is not good is because after c6, our rook is attacked. So we say, okay, no problem, let's go rook d3 till we can sacrifice, and then oops, we forgot about bishop e5. And bishop e5 is just winning over here. So remember the idea was after c6 we have to play f4. However, we can't play f4 here because our rook is hanging. So that's actually not a free pawn. So if we don't take that pawn, the best move according to the computer here is f4. So f4 is after c6, it's like proactively stopping bishop e5. However, black now plays c6 and defends their d5 pawn. So in this line we say, okay, how about we just continue our idea and we go rook d3, because now we're going to sacrifice on c3, right? Well, actually we're not, because after d4, e takes, c takes, d4, rook takes d4, guess what, there's c5 now. So we say, okay, no problem, now we're going to drop back to d3, and there's no bishop e5, so this should be good. So we drop back to d3, and then black hits us with rook c6. And rook c6, okay, so white's thinking, okay, so we're gonna free our pieces first. However, when we take rook takes c3, rook takes f6, notice that we're completely losing here, because anywhere we move our rook, which was actually why it was important before we played a takes b5, because anywhere we move our rook, we cannot check black's king. Meanwhile, black can check our king. So for example, if we just play rook d3, rook takes f4 check, g takes f4, and queen takes a1, and black wins. And we can't even play we can't play rook takes c5 with check because there's a pawn over here, which is why black played a takes b5. So now even after this, the same idea still stands, because black has a check and we don't. So that's actually why, and then because black can get the sacrifice off and we won't be able to, black just wins in this position. So that means he can't even take once d4 is played. So that's why in this position, f3 I would recommend as the main line, because we can't play rook d3 anyways, because black is going to be in time with d4. So f3 prepares to develop pieces and add an extra attacker over the d4 square. So so knight c7 is played over here. And so you might be thinking, so for example, you might be thinking black should play knight e6 and add an extra extra piece to defend on d4. But after in this position, which is still a good move by black. Let's see, we have rook d3. If d4, e takes. See, the computer saying knight a7. Let's see if we take, black takes back, bishop takes d4, knight takes, rook takes c3. Oh, because after here we're going to have here check. And if we go over here, oh, okay, this is interesting. So we have checkmate eventually on the board over here. uh, even knight takes h6 check, g5, knight f5, and we can't stop checkmate with either of these two squares. So, and of course if over here we take, then black frees their queen and our rook is pinned. So after in this position you have to play rook takes d4, and I think, oh, and then the same thing's going to happen after c5, and if we drop back, then rook c6, and the same tactic is going to be happening. So that's why in this position we can't take now. So even this move is completely playable, but I have another interesting idea that black has in the notes. So black can play knight e6, but also knight c7, because now if we go rook d3, so this move actually shows the power of these pawns. So after black played a takes b6, b5, the other idea is that like black has a lot of pawns that can go forward. So if rook d3 over here, then c4, rook captures, pawn captures, queen captures, and then look, pawn goes to b4, and so if we drop the queen back, we're actually going to get trapped again with c3. So the queen has to go to, let's say, d2, and then c3 is played. And in this position, black should be definitely better over here because white's bishop is trapped. So white only freed their queen, and if you look, like, this pawn's going to be weak, so the queen has to move. Let's say we go queen e2, we go knight de6. It's actually, we can even go, we can go knight e8 over here, and white can't defend against the knight taking on f6, and black will have sacrificed less material and also free both of their pieces. So maybe if we played queen d4 over here, though I'm pretty sure we're just going to get like attacked. Let's see, c5 over here, and if we move back, the same thing's going to happen. And if we go to e5, then so now the bishop hits the queen, and it looks like queen e7 can be played over here. We're attacking this rook. We have oh, actually, I'm wondering if we can play here bishop d6, queen d7 gets played. Oh, and even after this, computer's saying black can just like hang, like sacrifice the rook to free the queen. But yeah, black's gonna get there. Black's gonna get the sacrifice, so black should win over here. So yeah, these are some of the lines with. So far they look pretty bad for. These lines look pretty bad for white. So if we just take f4, c6, f3, knight c7. So after here, yeah, so after here, this is why this line bishop e5, it might even be like a refutation, and black might have to play something like with f4 and bishop g4, as I showed before, because this is just really it's just a really good variation for black. Right, because after here black should be winning, but let's see. Well, e4, white has e4. So let's say black gets this sacrifice off. Oh, actually, there's some interesting stuff because bishop d4 over here, and black is completely pinned. So white actually might have some play in this position. So after e4, we have e4 we have something just like knight e6, and actually black is not forced to get the sacrifice off. So actually with e5 we can box in black's pieces again, and we can have a game from here. So this bishop b5 variation is not completely so if we have if I go back a few moves, knight e8, e so if I make knight e8 over here, if I make that the main line in this at least promoted, this move doesn't work, so we have knight e6 as the main move, promote that, and here. So actually then knight e8, this move, because black's not going to get the sacrifice off, that might not be the best move over here. So we might just yeah, but the point here, let me count some material. So I'm just going to hide in red the material that we're not going to be counting. So this is going to be similar practice to before, except now it's interesting because we're not going to be counting pawns for, well, actually it's interesting over here because so we're definitely not counting this bishop, and because it's only a bishop that's trapped, black could try to promote pawns and just free the bishop, but for now, because that will take a long time, we're just not going to be counting these pawns for right now. So actually a lot of material is not being counted, and if we just count what's left, white has 9, 14, 17, 20, 23 points of material, and black has 5, 10, 13, 16, 19 points of material. So white would be up some material over here, but it would be very hard for both sides to play this. And actually going back some moves, so now that we know that black's not going to get the sacrifice off, knight e8 is probably not the best move over here, and instead black should play something like, yeah, knight d e6. So I'll promote that to the main variation over here, knight d e6. This is very interesting. We go e4, and so we're after play knight b5 over here and e5. So yeah, we have a game over here actually, because again, black might be able to push through with the pawns because white's already freed one of their pieces, but even if so, just breaking through all of black's pawns for white would be very hard. So this is quite an interesting variation. So that I figured out on the start. So actually this bishop b5 move, it's an interesting move for black, interesting line that they can play, but it looks like white can survive with some of these lines. So let me recap that. So the main line over here was c6, but if black goes for bishop b5 over here, it looks like in all other lines white might actually be losing, but white has a very interesting they can play bishop takes b5 over here. After a takes b5, f4, c6, f3, knight c7, rook d3, c4, a6, e4, knight b5, something like this, and this is a very playable game for both sides. So actually now, before we look at that, we had knight e6 as the main move over here. So this might just be, so black still might have very good chances in this opening because knight e6 might just be the main variation over here. Let's see, rook d3, d4, and then we already covered that taking doesn't work. For example, if we took, we get mated, but if we even took this this knight, it's still not good for us as the rook gets to c6. So if we don't take over here, I think we'd have to concede that we're never going to take and just play e4 over here. To e4 now, something like knight ac7 and knight f2, and if the knight ever goes to e8, we play e5 over here, and we prepare to bring our knight to e4. So rook d8, knight e4 maybe. Actually, over here we're threatening to take on c3. So instead of going knight e8, let's say something like this, and now we have a variation like this maybe. So in this position, the computer definitely likes black better. I would say I think black would be slightly better in a position like this as well, just because they have more space for their pieces. But and these pawns over here look very threatening. So even if white gets like a sacrifice off, we could see some lines where black pushes these pawns or like traps in the bishop or something like we saw before. Yeah, so it does look over here like bishop b5 is quite a good move for black. So if white can't get the sacrifice off, then in this position it looks like we have a game for both sides. I would say though that black's one of the downsides of taking with the a pawn is that now black's king is never going to like become untrapped. It's always going to be trapped by its pawns. Whereas white could play maybe like g4 and then bring the king out and into the game in an endgame. However, right now this f4 pawn is really weak, so we can't do it at this point. And actually, black has some clear plans because black could maybe even take over here and have a rook on e8 and take on this e5 square. So I would prefer black in this position. So going back. So if so, this is the updated main move, knight e6. And so if we're not going to be able to take on c3, we probably don't need to play rook d3 over here, and we can just play. We could play something like knight d3 even. It's just going over some moves that could be played over here. Knight a c7 would allow for us to get to knight e5. Play knight e5. Rook f d8. So even something like this would probably be knight f2. So this one I prefer more for white actually over rook d3 because if we're not going to be able to take on c3, then rook d3 is not a good move. And if ever knight e8, then I think we can just play knight fg4, knight eg4, maybe over here, knight eg4. Computer likes better. Yeah, so even this variation, like it still says that I still think black is better as well because of this pawn, but white still, this one looks decently playable for white. But yeah, I would still prefer black in this position. So it seems like we have like a if we go back all the way, so we have the main line with c6, and I'm gonna go over like the variations with c6, like continue with the variations, but it looks like in this position white has to be careful, and maybe they just opt for like f4 if they see c5 on the board and play like an even game, because if they go over here and we have bishop e5 on the board, then after takes knight d6, and if we play something like over here, then like it's not bad for white, but looks quite good for black. So that's where we're at with this one, and so yeah, this is going to conclude this first part of the variation with pawn to e3. And yeah, maybe I'll have some follow-ups with some more bishop b5 ideas in theory, but for now that's that. So in the next video we're going to continue the main line, so not this bishop b5 move, which is a very interesting choice, but we're going to be going over the variations with 8 knight to e5 for white over here. And in the video after that, I'm going to be going over variations with e3 b5, which is another interesting one. And actually there are even some like I had a game that was played, so I'm playing like in an advanced like daily or correspondence chess tournament with this custom position. And so one of my opponents played something interesting. So it went something along the lines of don't remember exactly, but actually it was sort of like a bishop e5 sort of move. Let me see. I think it went with like I don't remember exactly how the game worked, but it worked somewhere where the bishop was able to go to b5 as well, and black had a decent game. I still was able to win the game, but basically after these games I'll be recapping, because I had some very interesting games in my tournament, so I'll be recapping those games as well, and maybe making a bit more updates, because this e3 pawn e3 theory seems very deep. There's still some stuff to be discovered over here for sure. So yeah, I'll probably make a fourth part where I do some updates on the position, but that's how it's going to go from here out. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you look forward to the next one, and I'll continue the theory on what's your decision custom position.